Good morning, boxing fans. We had rather an interesting set of events this weekend, spearheaded, of course, by Devin Haney, the Dream, as he calls himself, and then Gervonta Tank Davis. Haney fought on Saturday, and then Davis fought on Sunday. And with Devin Haney, he fought JoJo Diaz, and some people may know JoJo Diaz. He's actually very well known in like Mexican boxing circles. He's been around. He's not new to the game. And then Tank Davis fought Isaac Cruz. Isaac is spelled like you spell Isaac, but Isaac Cruz. Isaac Cruz is very well unknown. People didn't really know what he's about. And, the contrast between these two fights was shocking to me. And I'm not going to dwell too deep into like the innards of each round by round, but just seeing the two side by side at a macro level. And if I go back and I compare it against what happened with Teofimo Lopez and George CM Punk Cambosis, which to me that was a very exciting fight that stylistically worked. It just worked. It was something about it that just stood out in the crowd. When I looked at Devin Haney and what he was doing with JoJo Diaz, to me that fight didn't work. I won't say it was the most boring fight I've ever seen because that's not fair. Because of course Devin Haney is nowhere near as boring as Frank Sanchez. However, I will say that Devin Haney clearly outboxed that guy, and JoJo Diaz didn't show up, and that's the bottom line of it. And I know there may be people that are JoJo Diaz fans, and listen, I've watched him. I've been excited by his fights in the past, and I don't know what happened when he went up in weight, but all of a sudden he was fighting like Joshua Clottey against Devin Haney, and I'm not sure why because the story has always been Devin Haney has no power. Devin Haney's a pillow fisted fighter. Devin Haney can't knock anybody out, and yet Jojo Diaz is walking up with an excessive high guard and just walking forward. There were multiple situations where Devin Haney had his back to the corner or back to the ropes, and Jojo did nothing, didn't throw, didn't go after him, didn't show me he was trying to win. I like fighters that show me they're trying to win. And so my problem, largely with Jojo Diaz, hinges around the fact that I didn't see that he was trying to win the fight. So from my scorecard, I gave Jojo Diaz one round of that fight. And I know some people are like, one round. I gave him one round of the fight because that was the only round I could see he was trying to win. Every other round, literally every other round, Devin Haney was clearly outboxing this man when he shouldn't have. Because when JoJo did throw, he had Devin, on guard, especially when he went to the body. It was obvious that Devin was being bothered whenever JoJo threw to the body, but yet JoJo just wouldn't throw. It's like, why aren't you throwing? I was screaming at the TV at one point, why aren't you throwing? Why aren't you engaging? Why aren't you trying? I want them to try. I want them to show me they're there to win the fight. Jojo Diaz did not show that to me against Devin Haney, and as a result, yes, I will go on record saying I gave him one round. It was one of the earlier rounds. After that, he was just walking forward with a high guard, and it was obvious he was trying to wait for an open opportunity, but Devin Haney's too slick, too elusive. He moves too much. You're not going to be able to get that. So you got to be able to cut the ring off. He wasn't able to do that. And you just got to have to throw. You got to have to take risks. And if he really is pillow fisted, as people claim, then you should be able to just walk through the shots and keep going. I don't know why he didn't do that. Then on Sunday, I see Tank Davis, and Tank Davis is in with Isaac Cruz. And again, Isaac Cruz is unheralded, so nobody really knows what to expect, but most people expect it's a cherry pick. Now, for context, this initially was supposed to be Tank Davis versus Rolly Romero because of the beef between the two. And many people suspected that Rolly Romero was a cherry pick, that he wasn't anywhere close to Tank Davis. However, ladies and gentlemen, if you didn't watch Tank Davis versus Isaac Cruz last night, I got to tell you something. I'm not sure that he would have smoked Rolly Romero. I'm not sure that he beat CM Punk Cambosis because Tank Davis showed clear boxing skill. It was obvious, it was on display. But this guy, Isaac Cruz, came to win. He was there all night long, from the beginning bell to the last bell, and he was right on Tank's grill all night long. I gave the analogy, it was shades. I'm talking in terms of style and the visual and the come forward and the aggression and the no quit attitude. And then Tank broke his hand. And there were so many similarities with this fight and Mayweather Castillo I, in the sense that with Castillo was coming after Floyd, and he was boxing, he was moving, and he was stylistically brilliant, but he had broken his hand. And so he couldn't fully perform like he would have. with the knockout power that he had seen or the ability to keep the guy off. Castillo kept coming, and Castillo was tactically brilliant in what he did. I'm not saying that Cruz was skill-wise the same as Castillo. I'm saying the visual of the opponent of the hyped fighter is constantly coming forward, constantly giving pressure, just won't stop. I wanted to say Jesus Chavez, El Matador. The problem is that Chavez was way more active than Cruz was, and Chavez largely early on didn't need many shots at all. It wasn't until late that he started eating shots, and then eventually they quit on the stool. Whereas Cruz wouldn't quit, so I couldn't make that analogy. Two, Cruz wasn't throwing a lot, but he was throwing precise. So whenever he threw, he was fast, blistering fast, just as fast as Tank was. I think early in the fight, both guys tried to knock each other out. At some point, Cruz backed off and he started going after Tank and basically just chasing him down. That was bad because you're never supposed to just chase a boxer around. So what you saw visually was Tank Davis pivoting and rotating and just turning the guy around. He would nail beautiful uppercuts through the guard. He didn't land all of them, but the ones he did land were beautiful to see. And there were moments of the fight, I don't want to say significant moments, but there were moments of the fight where Cruz would have Tank kind of on the back foot, where he would land some really good shots downstairs, upstairs, and then have Tank on the run, literally on the run. I arguably had Tank Davis winning that fight 7-5. I saw 3 swing rounds, which means that you could have made a case either way. Tank immediately after the fight said he doesn't want a rematch, and I don't blame him because it was a tough fight for him, a really tough fight, and we don't know what's going on with his hand. If he is going to start having hand issues, I believe this is the 3rd time he's had hand issues after a fight. So if he's going to start having hand issues, just like with Floyd when he started having hand issues, and I believe that happened after the Charmbe Mitchell fight, he had to change style. He had to go away from going after knockouts each and every time and just kind of adjust his style to one that was more defensively brilliant, still offensively sound, but not I'm just going to walk you down and beat you down. However, he still did that against Shane Mosley. He couldn't stop him, but he was walking him down, walking him backwards. Same thing he was doing with Marquez. So Floyd was still able to be offensively brilliant, but he was nowhere near what he was doing back during the days of like an Arturo Gatti or an Angel Manfredi, where he was just blasting him out of there, or even Jesus Chavez, where he makes him quit on the stool. He was nowhere near that fighter anymore. However, he made more money in his defensively brilliant iteration than he did in his pretty boy phase. So I believe this may be the start of Davis's transition away from the knockout puncher we're used to and more into kind of the boxer. That may not be a bad thing, because one thing that Tank's gotten repeated criticism about is are you able to box? Can you actually hold the line? I think he proved that against Isaac Cruz by far. He proved he is a strong boxer. He has strong ability. He's not just a knockout artist. On the flip side, though, and I'll say this as a fan of him, as a fan of Floyd, and a fan of Isaac Cruz now, I think when I watched Tank and the shots he was taking, he has a lot of work to do in how he does his defense. Because what was happening was he was getting hit with shots even though he was trying to deflect it off the chin. That was happening also to Devin Haney. Whereas like they were misjudging where the shot was going, if it was going to go hit on the chin or behind the ear. So when they're trying to put earmuffs on, they weren't able to gauge which side to block. One thing about Floyd, and when he would do the shoulder roll, he was very precise in when he needed to block the chin, block the ear, and he would just roll with it if he wasn't sure. The only time he notably got nailed with a shot when he was trying to do it was against Shane Mosley, and that was, I believe, round 2, when Shane hit him with a good shot, and he was never able to do it after that. Floyd just adjusted after Uncle Roger came up and just said, don't worry about that. He ain't doing it. So I think Tank needs that. He needs that reinforcement of somebody to educate him on, it's time to now adjust your defensive style, because we can't just rely on knockout power. If it happens, but we can't go after it. You're not going to be able to get those highlight reel knockouts like Leo Santa Cruz anymore. We're going to need to get more defensively sound. The interesting thing about what happened and what I saw, when Tank fought Yuri Ortiz Gamboa, arguably, to me, never was in that fight. There was a point Tank was even distracted at something ringside. He wasn't paying attention. He was completely exposed, and Yuri Ortiz never threw a shot. So distraction might play a factor with Tank if he's not able to stay focused in there, unless he's under danger, because when he was in danger, he certainly showed up. But I think somebody just needs to sit down with him and now focus on his defensive prowess more than his offensive prowess. We already know he's offensively sound. We already know he's a brilliant offensive fighter. But I think he needs to work on his defense more. It's similar to with Terrence Crawford. Terrence Crawford will eat shots like crazy, and then eventually his offense helps him. But at some point, you can't just rely on the offense and just keep relying on it. That's what got Tommy Hearn sparked out against Hagler. At some point, you kind of have to figure out defensive brilliance. Later in Tommy Hearns' career, he became an amazing fighter when he went up in weight and he focused more on the fundamentals and being well rounded. He was an amazing fighter. He didn't need to early on because he was sparking dudes out. So I think it's similar with guys like Crawford, guys like Tank, that you can rely on the power only so much, and at some point, boxing brilliance and defensive sound, fundamentals are going to need to come into play to keep you safe and preserve you. And I think I don't remember if it was Abner Maris or Sergio Mora, one of the two of them talked about that. I think it was Abner Maris that said, I was doing things to preserve myself. I wanted to extend my career. Like a guy like Sean Porter, who had been through wars for years. Of course, he's going to retire a little bit early, feel like I've done enough and I don't need to keep going. But he had been through wars. And so he had stopped getting knockouts. Early in his career, he was knocking dudes out and stopping dudes. And then later, he had to enhance his fundamentals, but was no longer knocking guys out. So I'm saying all this to say that I think Tank is a work in progress from the defensive side. Devin Haney, he's a work in progress. I don't want to say offensive because that's not fair. He's a strong offensive fighter, but I don't know what it is about the power or why he's not able to get respect, I guess is what I'm saying, from his opponents. And Devin tends to get pulled into wars needlessly. That was one thing I noticed. Tank never got pulled into a war. What Tank was doing was trying to get respect from Isaac Cruz, and there were points he was successful and points he wasn't. But again, it harkens back to the Mayweather Castillo days where you have just a guy who's coming and he's not going away, and no matter what you do, he's still coming, and you break a hand and you still got to show up, and it's a close outcome that could have gone either way, arguably. And I think Floyd, when at the post-fight, he said, I gave Cruz 4 rounds. Based on the swing rounds, that's fair. But also, depending on how you scored it, as a fan, you might have just looked at Cruz's constant aggression, the fact he kept on coming forward, the fact he was never really truly hurt except for a couple of rounds that he got wobbled. Other than that, he was still there and he was still game and still coming. Like, to me, if I were Tank, I would run it back, if only to disprove the notion that he can't get this guy off him. Now, whether it's financially worth doing that, I can't say. But I will say I disagree with the 4 rounds that Floyd put up myself. This is me as a fan. I saw 5 rounds for Cruz, but that's based on, again, I gave Cruz one of the swing rounds because I thought it was fair. And I credit Cruz for just constantly coming forward and just being a warrior at spirit. And, if Floyd listens to this, I doubt he will, but if Floyd listens to this, it reminded me of Mayweather versus Jesus Chavez, another dude who just kept coming forward. But in that fight, Floyd got him out of there. He made him quit on the stool. He did what he needed to do to get the dude out of there, even though he kept coming, even though he was head forward, guard up. Floyd did what he needed to do to get the guy out of there. And I think that was what people were expecting of Tank just because of his past. And the not having it may have skewed people's perspectives to thinking that Cruz was really winning the fight, dominant or whatever, when in truth, it was a close fight. It was a close fight. I didn't feel that it was a robbery by any stretch at all. I think the right man won from my angle, from what I saw, based on the boxing skill that Tank Davis showed. There were some holes in Tank's game that he should work on from a defensive perspective. Other than that, if I were anywhere near the Mayweather camp or Tank's camp, I would say let's run that back, because I think we need to tell the fans that you're here and this was just a one-off. And it was a late replace. We can't discount it was a late replace. You might have been preparing specifically for Raleigh, which is a completely different style. Raleigh would not have been able to take what Cruz took. Raleigh would not have been able to eat the bombs that Cruz took. So let's just make sure we don't equate the two, because it was a completely different class of fighter in that ring. And I think they just didn't realize that Isaac was that hungry to just come forward like that, or they expected, not to be that fast, or that Tank was going to get him out of there. All credit, though, to Tank for the performance. All credit to Cruz for the performance. I feel the right man won. I don't believe it was a robbery. And I think it was fair to give Cruz 5 rounds from my angle. And I don't think it's a bad thing to say that, hey, Tank's got some holes in his defensive game and he should work on some of those. Because, again, if it's true that his hand's going to be bothering him, he's going to need to rely on that. just like Floyd Mayweather had to do when he was coming up. Regardless, it was a great night of boxing. Just, again, really odd outcomes with, Tank Davis versus Devin Haney versus the opponents that they were going against. It's not what I expected. I expected the polar opposite. I expected that Tank Davis would take Cruz out inside of 9 rounds easy. I expected that Devin Haney was going to struggle with the JoJo Diaz by far. Like, it's just weird. It's like, okay, it's complete opposite what I expected and didn't see coming. And then the irony, and I want to say it was the Devin Haney event, every fight ended in a stoppage. Every single one except for Devin. So, except for the main event guy. Like, every other fight was a stoppage outcome except for the headliner. Okay, that doesn't look good for you guys. Then DAZN talks about how Tank is number 5 and Devin's number 2, even though he failed to stop a guy who really wasn't throwing and was acting like Josh Clottey. Okay, guys, so, whatever you want to believe. But anyway, if you do get a chance to check out JoJo Diaz and Devin Haney's fight, I do recommend that one. If you're a fan of Mexican boxers, though, I would check out Cruz fighting Gervonta Tank Davis if you can. I'm not going to say any more than that, but if you can, definitely check out that fight with Devin Haney, Tank Davis, because I'm sorry, Cruz, he made the culture proud. He went out there, he did what he needed to do, and he put on a masterful performance. And again, if I were advising Tank, I'd say let's run it back because the fans liked the fight. They liked the explosive punches from both guys, and it was a match. It wasn't like Tank's usual, where it's just somebody there for the check or somebody that makes silly mistakes. Cruz made very few mistakes. He was there all night long, and he's a heck of a fighter, if nothing else. So that was our nights of boxing over the weekend. Again, I don't heavily cover boxing unless I see significant reason to. So you might not see things like, okay, Usyk just walked into the mall or something. I don't cover that. I cover when it's a significant outcome of some kind that I think is worth your time, and that's all I do. So if you're expecting like daily updates, you probably won't get it. Now, I will say that I will cover, I don't know if I'm going to cover Jake Paul, and apparently it's Tyron Woodley now. I doubt I'm going to cover that one. And, we have to see what's going to happen on the PBC side now with Errol Spence, and if he's going to come back and try to cover that one a little bit. Plus, Deontay Wilder's trying to get back in the mix. I'd love to cover him again. I've covered him on Lifeblood. I have to post those Lifeblood videos for him as well. So that's what I got. Make sure to watch those fights. Devin Haney and Tank Davis, if you get a chance to watch them, I certainly recommend the Tank Davis one, if nothing else. I personally don't think the Devin Haney one's worth your time, but if you're a boxing fan, they're both worth checking out at minimum.